ম্যাম আজকে কি মিড স্ক্রিপ্ট দেখাবেন?
না, আজকে তো আমি মিড স্ক্রিপ্ট তো চেক করি না, এবং মিড স্ক্রিপ্ট আমি এভাবে দেখাবো না। অফিস খুললে, যখন ক্যাম্পাস খুলবে তখন দেখাবো, ঠিক আছে?
মার্কস কি জানা যাবে? আই মিন, যদি দেখা হয় আপনার পরে কখন?
হ্যাঁ, আমি সেটা ডিসাইড করে জানাবো। অবশ্যই আমি নিজে নিজে তো আর আপনাদের ডিসাইড করেই জানাবো, ঠিক আছে? অলরাইট, আমরা
জি ম্যাম।
ক্লাসটা শুরু করছি। Okay, so this is root finding of nonlinear equations. We all know what linear equations are. Linear equations are basically যেখানে x এর ডিগ্রি থাকে হচ্ছে 1. So linear equation এ x এর ডিগ্রি থাকে x equals to 1. বাট নন লিনিয়ার ইকুয়েশনটা এরকম ইকুয়েশন যেখানে আসলে x এর ডিগ্রি হচ্ছে ডিগ্রি অফ x, degree of x is not equals 1. Sorry, it's not equals to 1. It can be -1, it can be 2, it can be 3, it can be -2, it can be anything, but it should not be 1. So বেসিক্যালি লিনিয়ার ইকুয়েশনের রুট ফাইন্ড করা খুবই সহজ, আমরা জানি কিভাবে কি করে, এক্স কে এক পাশে নিয়ে আসতে হয় এভরিথিং। নন লিনিয়ারটা একটু ঝামেলা। সাপোজ এরকম একটা ফাংশন চিন্তা করেন, লাইক এক্স স্কোয়ার মাইনাস 2x ইকুয়াল 0. সো টেকনিক্যালি in a nonlinear equation you need to find out what you need to middle term it, and you need to find out the root. However, if the degree of x increases, like if you have like x cube in here, like x cube in here, x cube minus 2x square plus 5x equals 0, something like this, it is very difficult to middle term it, right? And whenever the degree of this x increases, or this equation becomes complex, it is not that easy to do it like this, just middle term করে বের করে ফেলা যায়, এত ইজি না। সো রুট মানে কি? রুট মানে হচ্ছে এমন একটা ভ্যালু যেটা যদি আমি ফাংশনে বসাই, I get 0. So root is such value. If I place a value in in f, I get 0. So root is a value like this. Okay. So there are x square minus 2x equals 0. X minus এভাবে করে আমি কমন নিচ্ছি, x কে কমন নিয়ে আমি জাস্ট বের করছি। তো এটাকে 0 বানানোর কারণ হচ্ছে আমরা ধরে নিচ্ছি যেহেতু রুট কে f এ বসালে 0 হয়, সো এই পুরোটা ইকুয়েশন ইকুয়াল 0, এন্ড দেন আই ফাইন্ড দ্য টু ভ্যালুস। আচ্ছা, বাট এখানেও যেটা বললাম, নন লিনিয়ার ইকুয়েশন উইথ হাই পাওয়ার সিরিজ থাকলে আমাদের এভাবে করে বের করাটা ঝামেলা হয়ে যায়। So there are a few algorithms that we need to learn in this chapter, that we will learn for finding out roots of nonlinear equations. So this chapter is named Roots of Nonlinear Equations. Roots of Nonlinear Equations. So there are three methods that we will learn here. Number 1 is bisection, which we will teach in this class. Number 2 is fixed point iteration. Fixed point iteration. And number 3 is Newton's method. So we will start with this one. In the next class, we will teach this too, and then we'll be done. All right. So let's start with our first one, which is bisection method. What is bisection method? Basically, we all know binary search. Do you guys know binary search? In binary search, your array is sorted. And suppose this is a binary, this is an array which is sorted, like 1, 3, 6, 7, 11, 24, 56, like this. Suppose I need to find like 3. So যেটা করতাম আমরা, we would find a middle point which was like, say this is the middle point 7. 3 is target, say 3, target equals 3. So 3 is less than 7, so we know this will be in the left of 7, so we will continue our search in here, like 1, 6 এর মধ্যে. Then we will find the midpoint again, which is 3. We will see that mid is equal to the target. So we are done. So done. So this is how we used to propagate our binary search. This bisection algorithm is something like that. If you have a root, you will always bisect the interval in a way that you are closer to the root. Achha. So before starting how to do this bisection algorithm, first you need to know where to find root. So where to find root? Where to find root? So if you have an interval given like AB, this is an interval, okay? If an interval is given like AB, and this is a function f of x, this is A, and this is B. If FA and FB are on the opposite sides of this x-axis, then there has to be some crossing. And whenever there is a crossing, that means function টা এমন জায়গায় hit করতেছে, the x এর value is your root, because here f of x equals 0 at this very point. So there has to be a crossing. There has to be a crossing between these two values. If they're not on the, suppose this is like that, A is on the positive side and B is on the negative side. FA is on the positive side and B is on the negative side. If something like this happens, then there has to be some crossing across the x-axis. Since there is a crossing across the x-axis, that means it touches the x-axis. And when it touches the x-axis, the value is 0. That means this is our root. This is our root, okay? But however, if both of A and B are on the same side, like A and B, these are on the same side, like this. This is A and this is B. A মানে হচ্ছে the x-axis এর respect this is A, and B মানে হচ্ছে x-axis এর respect B. So this is A and this is B. If you have something like this, that means there has not been any crossing across the x-axis. There has not been any crossing over the x-axis. That means there is no root between A and B. So our hypothesis is, if FA and FB are on opposite sides, there will be a root between them. There will be a root between them. Achha. But there is a catch. There is a small catch in here. Like, even if A and B are on the same sides, it can also happen like that. There is a small turn করে যদি এরকম হয় যে ডিপ খেয়ে উঠে গেছে, এরকম যদি হয়, সাপোজ, right? So if it looks like this, then there are two roots in here, right? If I mark the roots in a red pen, so there is a root and there is another root. So there has been crossing, but still FA and FB are on the same side. So the hypothesis that we made, that FA and FB has to be on the opposite sides, there will be a root between them. This hypothesis is entirely wrong. Now, to find out that whether or not there has been kind of a deep or turn, I need to find out this point. And this point will be what? F prime of x equals 0. Because whenever you have a turns, the slope is 0. At turns, slope is equal to 0. আচ্ছা, আজান দিচ্ছি তো, আমি 2 মিনিট পরে রিজিউম করি, ঠিক আছে? ওকে, লেটস স্টার্ট। সরি, আসলে আমার বাসার একবারে কাছে মসজিদ, তো আওয়াজ অনেক বেশি হয়। আচ্ছা, আমরা শুরু করি। সো আমি যেটা বলছিলাম যে if there is any turn in there in between the 2 points and if you can find the turn, then if this turn, the point where turn is occurring is C, then you can just write your entire interval like this. You can just write your entire interval like this, because then you will have a solid, a small interval, and unit interval where there is no turns, and A and C are on the opposite side. So we can tell that yes, since if A and if B are on if C are on opposite sides, so there has to be some kind of root between them. When we can tell it, then C and B are on the opposite side, so we can tell there is a root between them. But we need to make sure that whenever we're saying this hypothesis that two intervals, that means the points in an interval, the two endpoints of an interval are on the opposite side, there will be a root between them. Whenever we are saying things like that, we need to make sure that there is no turning point between them. There is no turning point between them. That is something you need to make sure. There is no turning point between them. Okay. Only then this hypothesis is true. If there is no turning point between them, there has to be, they are on the opposite sides. All right. So let's see an example. Like suppose here you can see that there are two turning points, right? There are two turning points. How do you find the turning points? For finding the turning points, you need to do this. F prime of x equals to 0, then x থেকে যে values গুলো আসতেছে এইগুলাই আমাদের হচ্ছে turning point. These are our turning points. Okay. So if you find that there are two turning points, so C1 is your one interval, C1, C2 is another interval, and C2B arect interval. And you will see that AC1, C1, C2, C2B, these are all on the opposite sides, like AC1, FAC, FA and FC1 are the opposite sides, FC1 and FC2 are on the opposite sides, and FC2 and FB are on the opposite side. So there is a root in every interval. There is a root. এখানেও একটা root আছে, এখানেও একটা root আছে, এখানেও একটা root আছে. So there is a root between every interval. All right. So if we move on, something can happen like this as well. Like if there is an interval like A, B, C, D. Okay. So A, B. So technically, whenever you're finding the turning point, so there is C1, C2, C3, C4, and B. And you can write your intervals like this, like A, C1, C1, C2. These are such intervals where there is no turning points in between them. So it is kind of an unit interval, যাদের মধ্যে আসলে কোনো ধরনের turning point নাই. So আমি জাস্ট সবগুলো লিখে ফেললাম। এখন দেখেন এখানে AC1 এর মধ্যে there is a root, so it's okay. C1, C2 এর মধ্যে there is a root which is basically C2, so it's okay. C2, C3 এর মধ্যেও there is a root which is C2 because C2 is intersecting x-axis, so there is a root. But within C3 and C4 there is no root because they are on the same side of x-axis and there is no turns between them, so there is no root in C3, C4 and C4B as well, because C4B are on the same sides and there is no turns between them and there is no root between them. So since they're on the same sides, so
ম্যাম
basically, হ্যাঁ ম্যাম,
বলা যাবে? সরি, আমি ইন্টারাপ্ট করে ফেলছি।
হ্যাঁ বলেন।
ম্যাম আই থিঙ্ক আমার কাছে মনে হয় সবগুলো ডেরিভেটিভ বের করলাম, মানে বের করে যেগুলো জিরো আসে আর কি, মানে যেটা হরাইজন্টাল হয় আর কি স্লোপটা।
হুম,
তো ওই সবগুলো পয়েন্ট তার মধ্যে রেফারেন্সে পুট করি, যেগুলো জিরো আসবে এগুলো রুট বাকিগুলো বাদ দিয়ে দেওয়া হবে।
না, প্রথমে আগে আপনাকে টার্মস গুলা বের করতে হবে। আপনার যে গিভেন ইন্টারভাল আছে সেই প্রত্যেকটা ইন্টারভালের মধ্যে ফার্স্ট ইউ নিড টু ফাইন্ড আউট দি টার্মস। টার্ন গুলো খুঁজতে হবে, দেন দেখতে হবে যে টার্ন গুলো আসলে কি মানে আমার সেম সাইড না অপোজিট সাইড কিভাবে পড়তেছে। এটা আপনি প্লট করে বা আপনি যে সাইন টেস্ট করেও করতে পারেন, ঠিক আছে।
না আমি আসলে বলছিলাম যে ধরেন আমি স্লোপ জিরো কোন কোন পয়েন্ট আছে এই পয়েন্ট গুলো বের করে দেন চেক করলাম যে আসলে জিরো কিনা, ওইটাই আর কি।
এটা তো করার দরকার নেই, there are infinitely many points in an interval.
তা ঠিক আছে, এটা আসলে করে
There are
এখন।
there are infinitely many. Why would you do such thing? মানে you need to, what you need to do is directly slope zero ধরে তারপরে আপনার হচ্ছে পয়েন্ট গুলো বের করতে হবে, rather than just find মানে there are infinitely many points within an interval. এটা তো আপনি কোনোদিনও মানে ক্যালকুলেট করে শেষ করতে পারবেন না। এটা
ইয়েস ম্যাম।
এটা অনেক অ্যাবসার্ড একটা ইয়ে ছিল, সো নেভার মাইন্ড, মানে এটা আমার মনে হয় এই আইডিয়াটা কাজ করবে না এখানে, ঠিক আছে। ওকে, সো কি জানি বলছিলাম, হ্যাঁ, তো মানে কম আপনার সবসময় একটা ক্যালকুলেশন করার টাইমে খেয়াল রাখতে হবে যে এটা আসলে আমার কম্পিউটেশন এতটা ডিফিকাল্ট আমি করতে চাই না, মানে কম্পিউটেশন এত এক্সপেন্সিভ আমি সেটা করতে চাই না। আচ্ছা, so এখানে আমি একটা কথা বলছিলাম একটু আগে যে whenever the end points of an interval are on the opposite sides, only then opposite sides of an x-axis there will be a root between them. That means you need to test the sign of fa and fb. So if fa is positive and fb is negative, so there will be a crossing, which is this. This is the case. Fa is on the positive side and b is on the negative side. And when fa is negative, fb on the positive side, which is this. So there will be a crossing and there will be a root. So if you multiply fa and fb together, and the sign is zero, sign is less than, the value is less than zero, that means the sign is negative, only then there you can say that they are on opposite sides. Because whenever you multiply two numbers that are of opposite signs, you will always get negative. But whenever you're multiplying two positive numbers, you will get a positive value. Whenever you multiply two negative numbers, you will still get a positive value. So the only time you'll get a negative value as a product is when the two numbers that you are multiplying are of opposite signs. So this is what we need. We need to find fa and fb. We need to find whether fa and fb are on the opposite sides. So opposite side মানে হচ্ছে opposite signs. So that is why you will just multiply fa and fb, and then you will see whether or not this is less than 0 or this is a negative number. All right, so this is how we will find. এখানে এই যে এখানে এই তিনটেই বলছে, সেম দিকে থাকলে পজিটিভ আসতেছে, সেম দুটি নেগেটিভ হলে পজিটিভ আসতেছে, বা দুটো যদি দুই side হয় তখন গুণ করলে নেগেটিভ আসতেছে। এখন আমরা ডিরেক্টলি ম্যাথে যাব, তার আগে আমরা হচ্ছে এই বাইসেকশন অ্যালগরিদমটা কিভাবে চালায় সেটা আমরা দেখব। So this is A and this is B. You need to find out a root between these two numbers, A and B. This is f of x. Okay, this is a graph. So you need to find whether these two interval have a root in between them. So this is your root. Okay. Let me use another color pen. আচ্ছা, এখন এখানে আমি ফার্স্টে বলতে পারি আমার fa is positive, fb is negative. Sorry, fa is negative and fa is negative, fb is positive. That we can tell. Okay, so if you multiply them together, you will get a number which is negative. So we can say that yes, root between a and b. এটা আমরা এখন বলতে পারছি, root between a and b. Okay, এখন so there is a root between a and b. Okay, so now you need to find out the middle point between a and b. So this is your middle point, which is m. So how do you find your middle point? M equals to a plus b divided by 2. You will need to find out whether fm is on the opposite sides with a or on the opposite sides with b. Fm is on the opposite sides with Fa. That means there will be a root between Fa and between A and M, not M and B. So A B যে ইন্টারভালটা আমার ছিল এটাকে আমি দুই ভাগে ভাগ করছি, A M and A B, M B. A and M, Fa and Fm, these are on the opposite side, so there is some root between them. But M and B, that is Fm and Fb, are on the same side, so there is no crossing. There is no crossing between them. So we can say that there is no root between them. We can say there is no root between Fm and Fb. Okay, so let me just wipe this off. So now the interval that you are concerned about is AM. আগে আপনি AB নিয়ে concerned ছিলেন, এখন আপনি AM নিয়ে concerned, ঠিক আছে? So now you need to find out another midpoint that is between A and M, which is M1. So M1 is A plus M divided by 2. So that's your M1. You will check the sign of FM1. We can see that M1 and M are on the same sides. So now your interval can be shortened to AM1. And then you again find the midpoint between M1 and A, which is M2. So M2 is, A plus M1 divided by 2. You will see that now M2, that is our FM2 and A are on the same sides. So you can safely say now our root is in between M1 and M2. Since between A and M1, A and M2, there is no root, there is no crossing. So you can safely say that there is a root between M1 and M2. Next, what you need to find out, M3, which is between M1 and M2, which is our M3. And you will see that M3 somehow merges with the root. একটু zoom in করি, বেশি zoom in হয়ে গেছে, my bad. হ্যাঁ, zoom in যদি করি দেখেন যে M2 and M3 এর মাঝামাঝি আমি M3 টাকে পেয়েছি. So that is where our root lies. So whenever you place your M3 within F, you get 0. So that is the condition of root. Whenever you put the value of root in your function, if you get 0, that means that is the root. So whenever you put the value of M3 in F, you get 0. That means your M3 is the root. You will see that with each iteration, how we are halving the interval into 2. We're literally halving the interval into 2. We are halving the interval into 2. So since we're having the interval, so the search space gets reduced by 2 with each passing iteration. So this is how our algorithm propagates. Why is it getting zoomed in? So this is how our algorithm propagates. First we had AB, the entire interval. Then we saw that the interval can be shortened to AM because there is no root between M and B. Then AM1, we short it further. Then M1, M2, we shorten it further. Then we can see that M1 and M2 এর মাঝখানে যে middle point ছিল, which was M3, the middle point between M1 and M2 is our root. So we are done. Whenever you find the root, you are done. So this is how this algorithm propagates. So let us see an example. And if you, okay, another thing that I need to share here, that not necessarily when you place a value in F, you get the exact 0. You can always get something close to 0. Okay. Here, if you place M3 in F and you get a value that is close to 0, like 0.00001, you can also say that yes, M3 is the root. Does not have to be exactly 0, but if you place the value and see there is a very small number, which is 10 to the power minus 7, 10 to the power minus 8, this is a very, very small number. You can definitely say that, okay, M3 is our root. We can do the math now. Okay. So there is a function which is given, which is this. A function that is given, which is this. And these are interval 1 plus 1 comma 3.2. These are interval. We will safely assume that there is no turning point in between them. There is no turning point. আমরা safely assume করে নিচ্ছি, ঠিক আছে? এখানে এই ম্যাথের জন্য বলেছে use bisection method to find solutions accurate within 10 to the power minus 3. What does it mean? What does it mean by accurate within 10 to the power minus 3? That means whenever you place some value, whenever you place any value, you place any value in f, if you get a value, if you get a result which is less than 10 to the power minus, say, you can say that your root is that any value, any random value. That means not necessarily it has to be exactly 0, but if it's close to 0, then you can safely say, okay, this is my root. So that is how the question will be worded. So আমরা শুরু করি এখন ফার্স্টে আপনি দেখেন ইটারেশন নাম্বারগুলো লেখা আছে the iteration numbers iterations are numbered as 0 1 2 3 4 like this. So if I ever tell you to say do 5 iterations, that means 0 1 2 3 4. All right, so the iteration number, this is index from 0. Okay, so in first iteration, that means 0th iteration, you have the entire interval, which is 1 and 3.2. These are given. A0, B0, these are given. You find their midpoint, which is 2.1, and you find all of their signs. Okay, for finding out the signs, you need to place these values in f, and you will find a value. So we can safely say that mk and bk are on the opposite sides, right? Because mk is on the positive, because the value we get is positive, and bk we get a negative value. So this is on the opposite side. So our interval is 2.1 comma, our interval was 2.1 comma 3.2. Why? Because now we can safely say that, okay, ak আর mk এর মধ্যে কোনো root নাই. There is no root between ak and mk, so we need to find a root between mk and bk. So that is why whenever you start a new iteration, your iteration should start with 2.1 comma 3.2 as your interval. This is a new interval. Okay, so আগে যে m টা ছিল সেটা নাও a হয়ে যাচ্ছে, a মানে আমাদের left interval. So আগে যেটা m ছিল is becoming our new a, that means our new left interval, and b remains the same. You find the middle point in here, and again you test all of their signs. You see that new mk, that is m1 and b1, these are on the opposite sides. So now your interval is 2.65 comma sorry about that, 2.65 comma 3.2. We still have not reached the root. Whenever you're placing the mk in f, we see that it is not less than 10 to the power minus 3. So we still have not reached the root. So now our interval is 2.65 and 3.2. Okay, fine. You find the midpoint, you check the signs, and you see that again the interval is on the right side. So your new interval is 2.925 and 3.2. So 2.925 becomes your left interval, and 3.2 remains the same, and you find the middle point. And then you find their signs, and you see that now the left interval has the root, because these are on the opposite sides, ak and mk, this a and this m. So now we can safely say that our new interval is 2.925 and 3.0625. So whenever if you start equation number 4, you will write this 2.925 and 3.065 and 625 and their middle point. And then you will check the signs and you will continue. Since it's a very long math, we have decided not to show it on our lecture notes, but you can do it for your own practice. However, after at your 10th iteration, that means in iteration number 9, you will see that you get an M. You get an M. This M, this M, this is your M. This is M9. If you place this M9 in F, you get a value which is less than 10 to the power minus 3, which is exactly what we are told to do, that you need to find solution accurate within 10 to the power minus 3. This is exactly what they have told us to do. So, since we can safely say, okay, then our M9 is our root. So, we take this as our root, and root and notation is X star. This is the rotation for root. Notation for root. This is our notation for root. So we can take up to 3 decimal points since our error bound is 10 to the power minus 3. All right. So this is how you'll propagate. So there are two things that I need to share in here, because the question will not ask you to find the root, because it might you might find it after 100 or 200 iterations, because it will be very tedious. So we won't ask you that. We'll probably ask you to find 5 iterations or 7 iterations or 3 iterations, depending on the marks. However, if I say find out 7 iterations, but if you get result after 4 or 5 iterations, you will not continue doing it, because if you find the root, you do not need to continue doing it further. Am I right? Because the whole point of running this bisection algorithm is to find the root. So if you cannot find the root, then there is no point. And if you have already found the root, there is no point of continuing the iterations. Does it make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So there is another thing, that is how many iterations are there to find that you need to find out the number of iterations. Sorry, to find out the root. So you need to find out the number of iterations. So this is our formula. The formula is very easy, I would say. There is first you need to find the log of difference between the two intervals. Remember this absolute value sign in there. Minus log E. This E is our machine epsilon. And this is log 2. Why do we have a log 2? Because we're always halving the interval into 2. That is why we have a log 2 in there. And there is a minus 1 as well. Now, whenever this E right there is error or machine epsilon, something like this, you will put this minus 1. However, whenever you have this E as accuracy, you will not put this minus 1. Is it clear? And this N is your upper bound. And this entire value is your lower bound. So any N, it should be greater than this. Okay. So we have the interval 1.5, 3. It's a random interval of this EM, that is our machine epsilon. So since there is a machine epsilon, your formula should have a minus 1. Since it is a machine epsilon, your formula should have a minus 1. And N greater equals হচ্ছে আমি log হচ্ছে use করছি log 3 minus 1.5. These are our intervals, and we use an absolute value minus log E. This is our E, which is our machine epsilon in here. So this divided by log 2 and get minus 1. So this is 52.59. Since iteration cannot be literally half, 52.5 volt that iteration number hote pare na. And you cannot have half an iteration. It has to be the full iteration, right? So the upper bound, so the lower bound has to be 53. All right. So any number of iterations greater than 53 is needed for finding out the root. However, another thing that you need to you need to consider is that whenever this error bound is less, that means you can find the root easily. Whenever the error bound is more, that means you have to be more accurate. Okay, this is 10 to the minus 16 or 17, right? That. So then the number of iterations, what? It should increase. So if your error bound is something, it's very relaxing, like 10 to the power minus 2 or 10 to the minus 3, you will not need many iterations. You will be done within a few. However, if your error bound is very, very, very less, that means it's very close to 0. That means you need to find out a really accurate answer. So we need more number of iterations. So this is our bisection method.
ম্যাম ওই ম্যাথটাই হচ্ছে এপসাইলন নট ইকুয়াল টু মেশিন এপসাইলন নট যে ধরলেন ওখানে হচ্ছে 10 টু দি পাওয়ার মাইনাস 16 কেন, এটা কি ভুলে নাকি 10 টু দি পাওয়ার মাইনাস 6 হবে, যেহেতু কোয়েশ্চেনে 10 টু দি
10 to the
পাওয়ার
power minus 16, 10 to the minus 6 ভুলে লেখা হয়েছে। 10 to the power minus 16 করলে অ্যান্সারটা আসে। একটু
Okay,
চেক
ma'am.
করে দেখেন, কোয়েশ্চেনে যা থাকবে সেটাই আসলে লিখবেন। তো মেবি ভুলে দেওয়া হয়েছে, ঠিক আছে। আজকে ক্লাস আর আমি কন্টিনিউ করতে চাচ্ছি না, আমি নেক্সট ক্লাসে একটা নতুন এই যে ফিক্সড পয়েন্ট যেটা, এটা একদম নতুন ফ্রেশলি আমি স্টার্ট করবো। ওটা কই গেল? 3টা পয়েন্ট যে লিখেছিলাম, ওটা একদম ফ্রেশলি স্টার্ট করব। সো কোথায় যে লিখলাম, এই যেখানে 3টা পয়েন্ট লিখছিলাম, একটা হচ্ছে বাইসেকশন, একটা ফিক্সড পয়েন্ট ইটারেশন, তারপরটা হচ্ছে নিউটনস। নেক্সট ক্লাসে হচ্ছে আমরা ফিক্সড পয়েন্ট ইটারেশন এন্ড নিউটনস এই দুটো শিখবো, ঠিক আছে। সো দ্যাট উইল বি অন স্যাটারডে, অলরাইট, দ্যাট উইল বি অন স্যাটারডে। এই দুটো আমরা একসাথে দেখবো। আচ্ছা, সো হ্যাঁ, সো আজকের ক্লাস তাহলে এ পর্যন্তই থাকছে। আমি হচ্ছে আপনাদেরকে রেকর্ডিংটা শেয়ার করে দিব, জুমের লিংকটা শেয়ার করবো, আপনার ওখান থেকে ডাউনলোড করতে পারবেন বা হোভার করে দেখতে পারবেন। অলরেডি রেকর্ডিংস এন্ড এভরিথিং টিউটোরিয়ালস দেওয়া আছে, সো ওইটা দেখে নেবেন।